Hey.
What's up, party people?
What's up, everybody? It's another week of Case Files. I'm sorry. We got Ashley.
We don't know how to say
I'm
her
so
name.
used to you doing the introduction. I'm sorry, my bad. Guys, I was so sick last week, and now I'm back, and I'm just like, what are we have a podcast?
Missed you.
What are we even doing?
We missed you. But how are you feeling today?
Well, now my stupid allergies are flaring up because of all the rain.
So she's not, she's
I'm
not
here,
sick.
but
She's
like
just
I
sniffling.
sound all nasally. And
Yeah, you're so fine.
sniffling the whole damn time.
You sound great.
Yeah.
You didn't sniffle at all in the meeting today.
Yeah, but now we're recording.
Now that
so
we're
I'm gonna
recording.
be like sniffing the whole time.
She's already prepping herself.
Preparing.
All right. Well, I know you have like not a long story,
It's
but
not
it is a
long at
two-parter.
all. It's going to be like a 7-parter.
Okay, it's a 7-parter.
Because I'm just
There's so many little bits to tell about this.
I'm just going to break all of it down into different episodes.
That gives me 7 weeks off. Is that what you're saying?
No.
Okay,
like,
okay.
you can tell your story, then the next week I'll tell my
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Really. You go ahead. You're next week, too. Okay. I have a very big.
And then I'll be gone for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe forever. Who knows?
Always and forever. Oh, do I have to find a co-host replacement?
I mean, Sarah.
Sarah.
I mean, we have a list of people who want to be hosts
I
on the show.
know.
And
Just
they
have
never
everybody.
come.
Just have everybody just show up.
Just put a post out there on Facebook. Maybe someone will answer that one. Who knows?
All right. Well, so what do you have for us today?
How exciting.
It is my birthday show, though.
Yes, it is. Your birthday is, well, it will be before we release this episode. It's Wednesday.
That's right. And
happy early birthday.
I get this.
Yay.
Wah, wah, wah. Wah, wah, wah. All right. So
she's going to be
it.
21 tomorrow, guys.
47.
Oh, that's special age.
Do you remember those years?
I do.
Fondly.
Yes, they were so long ago.
Man, I feel 47 today because it started raining. We haven't had like this kind of rain in so long, and my bones woke up this morning like, don't get out of bed. Yeah. So I just took a gummy. I'm good.
I'm sorry, this cat. Your cats are so pretty. So like, I just get distracted.
They are, and Socks is so loving and sweet
and soft. And Louie is really soft, but he's not.
He's not a people person.
Yeah, he's
the kids were like, "Daddy, we need another cat." And he's like, "We have a cat. We need another cat."
I just started working with a pet rescue, like doing some stuff to help them, and they're like, you should come see all the cats and dogs and stuff at the next adoption center. I'm like, no, I will want all of them, and I will feel bad because I don't. They're like, but the cats really need help, and I'm like, I understand, but I will have 500 of them, and
you don't want to be that lady.
And so anyways, yeah, my story is not about animals.
Okay, so we'll just
kind of. I mean, but not really.
Oh shit.
It's
okay.
I mean, you know.
Okay, well, without further ado.
Okay. Well, welcome. So I kind of mentioned before that I was going to be talking about a different area. So I, in the past, had talked about the Devil's Triangle, which is also like the Bermuda Triangle, and the 9 vortices.
The ley lines.
Yeah, the ley lines. So I did a whole episode on those and how it was just crazy and all this stuff was happening. But I was watching the Discovery Channel, and I came across this show, and it was just so fascinating to me. And it's just simply called the Alaska Triangle.
What?
And so over 20,000 people have gone missing since the 1970s. It's an average of 2,250 people disappearing every year, which is twice the normal average, and it's 100 times more deadly than the Bermuda Triangle.
Are we sure it's not a serial killer?
Yes.
Okay.
And more than 2,000 planes have either crashed or gone vanished in the last 20 years. Honestly, just on plane disappearances, like legitimate vanished out of thin air plane disappearances, I could probably
wreckage.
No wreckage, no people, nothing. I could probably do just 3 episodes on the planes. But so this one's going to be talking about one story, and then the next one I'm going to talk about some mystic creatures that they have. So everything on
Don't
this
give it away. Don't give it away.
Yeah, everything on this show. Don't watch the show until you guys listen to our podcast. Okay, great. Everything on the show that they talk about, they only bring it up if they have verified proof that someone has actually seen. Like, they don't just talk about Sasquatch because people claim, like, they have to have some kind of evidence of whatever they're talking about on the show to prove that it's a legitimate thing.
Okay, so have they proven that there's actually people missing? Like, have family members? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And so, again, it's not just that it's Alaska and it's deadly, right? Like, I'm going to talk more about it, but Alaska is, with the planes, for instance, and again, I'm going to talk more about it, is very heavily monitored because it's so close to Russia. So it's not like normal airspace where if something happens, maybe it just crashed in an unforeseen area. No, Alaska is very heavily monitored. So anyways, I'm going to play the first, like, just kind of the intro to the show because I think it's really cool and it kind of tells you a little bit about the triangle. And then I'll start into the story.
Alaska, a vast remote wilderness twice the size of Texas.
There are dangerous, unpredictable forces at work here.
In one of the most mysterious corners of the globe.
A lot of things can kill you out here without even trying.
This is a place hundreds of times more deadly than the Bermuda Triangle.
Oh my God.
Stories of alien abductions.
I believe it was a UFO.
The paranormal, vanishing airplanes, and strange beasts.
That's just a very brief introduction to the Alaska Triangle. Ooh. And so all of the episodes are going to talk again about different parts. But
just like in comparison, do you know how many people have gone missing in the Bermuda Triangle?
In the Bermuda Triangle?
Like, because 20,000 seems like a lot. I mean,
the thing about the Bermuda Triangle is that most of it can be explained. Okay. They have determined it's either electromagnetic fields or just someone went off course. Things like that. Whereas with the Alaska Triangle, most of it is unexplained, cannot be determined. Even with the military, like, there's so many top secret reports involving the Alaska Triangle area. So this just says that 50 ships or airplanes have gone missing, and in retrospect, 2,000 planes have disappeared.
Wow.
And there are ships that have disappeared in the Alaska Triangle, but that's going to be a whole nother episode I do about.
And we're all freaked out about the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah, it's literally 100 times more deadly than the Bermuda Triangle, and not just temperature-wise.
Tell me exactly where in Alaska.
So the Alaska Triangle connects the state's largest city of Anchorage in the south to Juneau in the southeast Panhandle to Barrow, which is a small town on the state's north coast. So, again, many things with the Bermuda Triangle have been explained, or, it is just not to the extent of the things that are happening here in the Alaska Triangle. There's actually a guy in the episode that was a pilot, and he flew through the Bermuda Triangle, and he was pulled into a vortex and is the only known person to survive flying through a vortex. And he has a really interesting story. And so I'll post his name in the post because I don't have his name right here in front of me. But he's actually been interviewed a lot about the story I'm going to talk about and the similarities that were involved between this story and his story of what happened when he was pulled into a vortex. Anywho. So, a lot of the stories have been passed down for generations, like starting with the native people in Alaska. It's just keeps passing down. So it's not just like young people posting on the internet, making stuff up, or, hunters walking through the woods and see something and say it's like Bigfoot or whatever. Like, these are people who have been there since since the beginning, and they just pass these stories down. Okay. Again, so much that I could talk about, but today the first event I want to talk about is the disappearance of the Douglas C-54D military transport airplane. So this was a very important military plane. It took off from the Elmendorf Air Force Base, which is located in the middle of the triangle. On January 26, 1950, it took off from the from the Air Base. Air Force, my God. It took off from the Air Force Base on January 26, 1950, and it has disappeared without a trace. Literally nothing. So the plane was en route from Alaska to Montana, and it had 44 people on board. So there were 8 crew members. There was a woman civilian and an infant son, and everyone else was military. It was not, normally civilians weren't on the plane. Normally it was used to transport military crew, supplies, technology, those kinds of things. Anyways, the aircraft made its last radio contact 2 hours into an 8-hour flight. And despite being one of the largest rescue efforts ever made, it was a joint effort between Canada and the U.S. No trace of the aircraft, no trace of the passengers, never been found, nothing, not a shred of the plane, not luggage, none of the military stuff that was on it, the pilots, nothing. It just disappeared. And so the aircraft was part of the 1st Strategic Support Squadron, Strategic Air Command, and it was out of Biggs AFB, which is Air Force Base in Texas. So in addition, again, to the 8-man crew, it was carrying 36 passengers, the woman and her child. There was, as far as the government has released, there was nothing top secret on this plane that would make it a target for another country to want to shoot down. But a lot of people wanted to know, or like a lot of people now that are researching it wanted to know why the military was so hell-bent on finding this plane if there was no one special on the plane and no special normal search and rescue, right? But there was like so much effort put into finding this plane. And they claimed that there was no out of ordinary passengers on there. There was no top secret anything on there. So they're just like, why?
Right, but you wouldn't just we lost a plane with 44 people.
Well, no, but they just mean like, when I talk about all of the effort that they put into this, a lot of people just want to know why. Because you don't put that much effort into other lost planes and such. Anyways, you'll see.
Okay.
So, when the plane did not arrive in Montana, a search and rescue effort which launched combining as many as 85 American and Canadian planes, in addition to 7,000 personnel, 350,000 square miles were searched. The search was aided by soldiers and equipment that had already been ferried to the area, because at this time, the United States and Canada were about to participate in some war games. And so they had already been working together. They'd been in contact. And so that was put on hold, and all of those soldiers were now moved to try to find this plane. So the operation was full of many false reports of smoke signals. They heard garbled radio communications. But the strangest thing of all of it was 3 of the search planes also crashed while looking for the Douglas. Though in those situations, all the crew members did survive. But the first one was on January 30th, a C-47 Air Force flight. It was the 57th Fighter Wing. It had been participating in the search, and out of nowhere, the entire plane stalled and crashed into the mountains near Whitehorse. Now, its crew members were injured. There were no fatalities, but the pilot walked 13 miles to the Alaska highway and flagged down a truck to call in support to save his crewmates because they could not use their radio or anything when the plane crashed. Everything failed. And these are like military grade, highly maintained airplanes.
Wow.
On February 7th.
This is in 51?
1950.
Okay, 50.
So on February 7th, a C-47D flight left from Ellison Air Force Base, and it employed on the same search, crashed on a mountain slope south of a lake. There were 10 crew members on board. There were no fatalities. They don't know what happened to the plane. They don't know why it crashed. It just...
Failed.
Just failed.
And did it also stall, or did the instruments,
everything just failed, and they crashed into on the side of a mountain slope south of Ashikik. I don't know how to say it, lake, but and then on February 16th, a Royal Canadian Air Force C-47 crashed near Snag. So its 4 members sustained light injuries, and later its wreckage would mistakenly be taken for the missing Douglas, but it wasn't. So Snag is close to where the Douglas went missing, which is why it was mistaken. So, yeah.
Oh, man. Could you imagine if we're going to send you to look for a plane that 2 other planes have crashed for no reason?
In total, there were 85 planes, military planes, used in this search and rescue mission.
How many of them crashed?
3 in this area. There's a 4th that I'm about to talk about.
Okay. I need to stop asking questions.
But 3 crashed within like a 20-day period.
Jesus.
In this area.
No, thank you. Like, you know what? I'm sick.
And these are all trained Air Force pilots who are flying military-grade airplanes who are specialized in search and rescue missions, in war, in whatever else. And
so they're like, we're going to go on a search and rescue mission. Cool.
And they don't just crash planes into mountains. You know what I'm saying? It's not like a beginner pilot who has never been through Alaska, who's not used to the weather. These pilots were trained in Alaska.
They didn't all have a death wish.
Yeah. Like they were trained for this. They knew what they were doing, and either the planes stalled and failed, their equipment stopped working, just all kinds of weird stuff happened. And some of the planes didn't crash, but they still had mechanical failures. Like their radios wouldn't work, or something else would go wrong. The plane itself just didn't crash. So there was a lot of weird stuff going on, and a lot of it was kept top secret by the government. They would not release the reports for a long, long time, and I'll talk more about that. So the operation was suspended on February 14th as the search planes were sent to the Gulf of Alaska to search for another missing plane. This plane was a missing B-36 bomber that had been carrying a Mark IV nuclear bomb. And this bomb did not have a radioactive core. But obviously, it's pretty important to find. And so that wreckage was actually found.
Okay. I was like holding my breath over here. Like, please tell me they found
there's
it.
another missing plane.
Oh, great.
They're all military planes.
Oh, super.
Super. Yeah. On February 20th, 1950.
Could it be the Russians?
Well, we'll discuss that.
Okay.
Very good question.
I need to stop asking.
No. You're fine. That's a great question. We'll get to that in a moment.
I ask good questions.
On February 20th, 1950, the search was officially canceled and notifications were sent to next of kin informing them that the passengers were presumed dead.
Of the first plane.
Of the Douglas. In 2010, the descendants of the missing servicemen started a petition to the federal government through the We the People petition system, seeking to resurrect the search for their family's remains.
Awesome.
In 2020, Andrew Gregg was named as the director of an upcoming documentary about the search for the aircraft, and they have a whole documentary called Skymaster Down. I believe you can watch it on Amazon. I think there's a couple of different ways to watch it, but the documentary was aired in Canada, and that was on January 16th of 2022, and then now it was on the CBC's documentary channel, and so that was last year. And then in 2022, after the documentary's release, a group in Whitehorse consisting of a geologist, a historian, and a glaciist.
Sure. That sounds
They
right.
they study glaciers.
Yep, that's about
Okay.
right.
I've never heard of this term before, but I read it in the story and I was like, well, that's interesting. Anyways, among others, and they formed a whole group to conduct a renewed search for the missing aircraft using drones to explore any area that may have been inaccessible at the time, which was a very small area because, again, they had soldiers on the ground, they had airplanes, they had all kinds of people searching for this plane when it originally went missing. Now, 2022, from 1950 to 2022, were you really going to find much? But I mean, it's possible. They find stuff all the time, but they didn't find anything. Spoiler alert. Sorry. So what did happen to the Douglas? That's a burning question. There's lots of theories. And they all surprisingly make sense. And
They're all plausible. So
sure, if you're open-minded,
question, sure.
they're all plausible. And
it was Bigfoot.
I mean, it could have been.
Could have been. So going back, you said that 2 hours into this 8-hour flight, that was the last communication. Mm-hmm. Is that last communication helpful? Is that a hint? Do we know what that last communication was?
Yes.
It like,
you know
just
what?
up here having a
Perfect question.
segue.
Yes. And I'll talk about it, but the pilot actually said everything was going great. He was right on time. Nothing was wrong.
And then carbon monoxide started to get into the...
After that, just gone. So again, lots of theories, but no one can understand is how the size of the Douglas could just vanish. Because so veteran U.S. Air Force pilot Dan Hampton.
Is that one of the ones that have like the back?
No.
Where the things come out the back like it's pooping? You know, like
No.
things.
So
I don't know anything about things.
So veteran U.S. Air Force pilot Dan Hampton has made it his mission to figure this out. So Dan is actually a very well-known pilot. He's flown over 150 missions during times of war, and he is also a veteran of numerous search and rescue missions.
Huge plane.
So he is a big focus in a lot of interviews and a lot of documentaries because he just does not believe that this plane could just vanish. And he's one of the ones that said he wanted to know why the government kept everything so top secret if it was just an average plane, right? Like, sure, search and rescue, but why is it so top secret? Why are the reports redacted?
It was a Douglas C-47. Yeah, it's huge.
So the wingspan was over 100 feet. It was one of the most important planes in the U.S. Air Force.
It's huge.
Yeah. So the path that it was flying was a well-known flight path. It wasn't like this is the first time they had ever flown this way. But around the time that it went missing, it was the beginning of the Cold War. And so there was a lot going on between the United States and Russia and the Soviet Union and all of that. It was right in the beginning when things were starting to heat up.
That's why it was like Russia.
Yeah. And so everyone was in an arms race. They wanted all of the weapons, all of that. So Alaska is only 56 miles from the Soviet Union. And because of its closeness to that, Alaska was the launching point for almost all bombers. So they had like fighter jets and like bomber jets and all of that kind of stuff ready to go at the push of a button. Because if they got any word that Russia was coming to us, Alaska was the point of entrance into Russia. They could be the ones that would stop them the fastest. So they wanted all of the bombs, the fighters, all of that as close as possible to the USSR. And the Elfendorf base was built to protect the northern edge of the United States. So that's what its job was. And that's where the plane flew from. So because of all of this, Elmendorf had all of the technology. It had all of their surveillance equipment. It had fighter jets. It had all kinds of highly trained people. So one of the theories is that the Soviet Union may have shot the plane down. But again, it would have been almost impossible because they were the most equipped to be ready at any time to spot a Russian aircraft in the airspace. The military did investigate the possibility that the Soviet Union shot it down. However, the Douglas was flying directly away from the Soviet Union at the time that it stopped responding. It would have been impossible for any of the Soviet Union planes or any plane to get that far east without being spotted. So, according to the military, the Alaskan airspace is not like normal airspace. It is monitored 24/7, very carefully and closely at all times, even today, because it's right next to Russia. So the U.S. military in Alaska were experts in search and rescue. They're experts in surveillance. There's no way that they could have crossed over and shot down the Douglas without at least being recorded or spotted, even if they couldn't stop them. So they were kind of ruled out. So I did want to note there was an addition to those three, the search planes. I did say there was a fourth plane. I guess technically this would be the fifth plane. But it went down. So this plane was twice the size of the Douglas. And it cost in today's time over $40 million to make. This happened on February 14th, which was the same day. You know, I talked about the reason the search was called off is because they had to find this plane. So a B-36 was a nuclear bomber, and it took off from Elmendorf heading for Texas. It was on an exercise simulating a strike on the Soviets. The B-36 flew over the Pacific before turning back. It was turning back into the triangle with the coast in its sight as it was returning towards Juneau. The plane lost all power, complete power, and it crashed into Mount Kologat in British Columbia. So it crashed into a mountain. The plane, the bomb, and several thousand pounds of conventional explosives were lost. The bomb was never found. The wreckage was found. The bomb was never found. And it was the first loss of a nuclear bomb in history. So 5 planes, all disappearing within a 30-day period. And no one has ever publicly been able to explain what happened other than it was not the Soviet Union. They had nothing to do with it. Any of the cases.
They would have had to have like majorly advanced resources. I mean, they would have been able to, they would have been able to have drones that were small enough to be detected.
They said it would have been impossible to be, because nobody at that point in time had planes that were undetectable. And they would not have been able to know certain flight paths. Some they would have, But why would they take down the search and rescue planes? You know what I'm saying? But yes. Now, here are my favorite theories. This is really cool to me.
She did this little shake. You
I'm
guys. She's like,
excited.
oh, she did like the cat's gonna pounce.
I don't know if Adam still listens to our show, but he'll love this and he'll love the next episode.
Okay.
So another theory was that the plane flew through an interdimensional portal, or somehow otherwise been in intervention of UFOs. Now, you may be thinking, bullshit. But I'm about to play a clip, and then we're going to talk about the proof that they have that the government kept top secret from here and from Australia and some other reports that the only reason they got released was because a journalist did a lot of research and requested, and then they got the public records and they had to release them because of
FOIA.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so
FOIA is a Freedom of Information Act.
When they did that, they found all kinds of UFO reports that had never been released to the public before. And they're like not random people on the street. These are like military personnel people reporting these sites, like pilots that are in the air, personnel, all kinds of stuff. So anyways, earlier I made the statement that there was a lot of false reports of gargled noises and radio calls that they determined that they thought was the Douglas, but they could never find them. So
people could hear chatter of people talking, but not able to make out what they were saying. And it wasn't just in one location. It was scattered around the area.
You can't pinpoint where they're coming from. Can you imagine hearing these voices? You're struggling to make out what they're saying, but it's too distorted. It's too distant. It's kind of human sounding. You recognize that, but there's something just wrong about it. Imagine how eerie that must have been for the people who were picking this up.
So people would hear calls, distress calls, and they would hear these calls for help. And they thought it was the plane, and they would go to the places where the calls were coming from, and nothing would be there. And this was happening all over the Triangle area. No, they would be in a certain area, and they would hear these calls for help, and they would look around. And so it was determined or thought, part of the theory was that if they did travel through one of these vortexes, that they actually went to another dimension or another universe, and that's why the sounds were coming through, because they were calling from this other place and they weren't actually there. And the voices would just eventually grow distant and distant until no one ever heard them again. So that was one theory.
So, like, they're in that same place going, we're right here, and they're not there.
They wouldn't be able to communicate with them, but they could hear them. They could hear distress calls, like the plane is down, we need help, whatever. They could never locate where these calls were coming from. And they would be in the area where it said the calls were coming from. And then they started to get to where they couldn't pinpoint, hey, don't delete my story, kitty. Can I
walk right?
Okay. Well, Louie would tear my face off. I'm just really sorry, but I'm doing a story about aliens. He added a bunch of numbers to my story, guys. Good. 1 second. Okay.
6666666.
So they would hear like the ones that they could pinpoint, they would go and there would be nothing there. And then as they started to grow more distant, they couldn't pinpoint the locations anymore. And so and then eventually they just stopped hearing them altogether. So
she can't do the story anymore. The cat's just sitting on her lap.
No.
Socks, pew.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry, kitty. I'm sorry. Woo. You want to be the host? Here, get next to the mic. They can't hear you. Oh, can you guys hear that sad little meow? Because I wouldn't let him on my laptop. I'm sorry. I'm such a bitch. Okay. back to the story, guys. I'm really sorry, but I don't get to pet cats very often. UFOs really started being reported in large amounts around this time, especially in Alaska. Researchers attribute this to the fact that there is such a large amount of space and land and not a lot of people. So they would be able, in theory, to come to Alaska, do whatever experiments they want to do, and not be bothered, and then go back to wherever. There is an actual network in Alaska called the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON for short. And they are an international organization, and they report, they investigate UFO reports all around the globe, not just the United States, but they do have a large chapter in Alaska. And they actually looked into a lot of these stories, a lot of these claims. The first UFO report was actually from 3 women in 1947, and it was near the Air Force Base where the Douglas took off from. And so they made a report. People obviously didn't really believe them. But then after they made this report in 1947, just report after report, but the military didn't really believe, like they hadn't been reporting them at that time. Anyways, so the most notable example of UFOs was in 1987 when a Japanese plane flying from Iceland to Anchorage witnessed something that still has no explanation to this day. So the plane stumbled upon what appeared to be 3 separate UFO aircraft, and all of which followed the plane's flight pattern for roughly 400 miles before they disappeared after 30 minutes. So the entire time, the pilots reported that this unusual aircraft was darting in and out, coming in and out of their line of sight, performing strange aerial maneuvers that are unlike anything they had ever seen. It was not an average plane, and they were right in the middle of the Alaskan Triangle when this happened. So a top secret intelligence report from February 10th, 1950, that had become declassified, reported that the UFOs had been stalking U.S. naval planes just days before the Douglas vanished. And I thought, well, that's an interesting term, stalking. Like,
just falling behind.
Yeah, I was like, well, that I haven't heard that before, but they said stalking them. So the first UFO report was above the Naval Air Station of Kodiak, which was 250 miles southwest of the Douglas departure area. The UFO was clocked on radar going 1,800 miles per hour. And at this point in time, there was nothing else that could go that fast. The United States didn't have planes that could go that fast. The Soviet Union, sure shit, didn't have planes that could go that fast. Nobody had planes that could go 1,800 miles an hour. And so during that time, again, we didn't have anything. And the plane operator reported the strangest interferences he had ever seen. And so anyways, the aircraft, they disappeared. And then just as quickly as that happened, they reappeared. And there was no other aircraft in the area. It disappeared again and then reappeared 2 hours later following the Navy plane. It followed the airplane for several more minutes before vanishing once again. So
what was the clocked?
1,800 miles per hour.
Oh, wow. It's pretty fast.
So they didn't see anything on radar. They could not find any trace of the aircrafts or flying objects after they disappeared the last time.
Sorry, y'all.
He's just very invested in UFOs. This is great. I love this cat. My little cheerleader over here. Yes, tell me more about UFOs. Well, I will, Socks. I will. The Navy chiefs issued a top secret report to the highest level of the U.S. government. The report was so important that 36 copies of the Navy's detailed analysis were sent to various security agencies such as the FBI, the CIA, the Air Force Intelligence, and the Department of State. So it never saw the light of day until the 1970s, where they were forced to release this information. So they were trying to keep this a secret. They did not want people to know that there were UFOs because they didn't think the general public would be able to handle hearing that these unidentified flying objects had been reported on the military base stalking the planes, that military pilots had seen them, because up until that point, they had kind of thought the people who had seen UFOs were crazy, you know, because it was 3 women in the 40s that originally reported them. So, you know, they're just silly little ladies.
They were menstrual.
And, you know, I mean, really, it's a weird concept, right? Like space creatures coming down, and now we all hope that they come down and take us. But at that time, they did not know anything about them. And so I'm sure it was very terrifying to see these random things following you. So anyways, it was kept secret. And so the Kodiak encounter happened 4 days before the Douglas disappeared. And so that was in Kodiak. That was 250 miles away. Happened 4 days before the Douglas flew out. An Elmendorf commander spotted 3 orange objects above the air base 2 days after the Douglas went disappearing.
Orange objects?
Orange objects above the air base. They hovered around 25,000 feet in the air and then vanished. He also filed a UFO report. And this was very unusual for him because he was not a believer whatsoever in this. But like I said, 4 days before, that one base had the naval planes being stalked by one. And then 2 days after the Douglas disappeared, this base saw it. And so also many believe that maybe a UFO used a tractor beam to pull the Douglas into its ship.
Oh, no. Oh, hold on. No. You don't get to be on the table anymore.
Oh, poor socks.
He was biting the microphone cord. See bad things happening. Oh, no.
Oh,
okay.
Poor baby.
All right.
So a tractor beam is strong enough. It would have been strong enough to pull in the plane. And so they thought this was a very real, like, possibility. It's a device.
Is there a tractor beam that exists
in Star Wars?
I mean, it doesn't exist, and that was a viable theory.
Tractor. Well, I'll tell you why it was a viable theory in just a second. But for those who don't know what a tractor beam is, it's a device that can attract one object to another from a distance. If you've ever seen any kind of depiction of a UFO, it's that light where the cow is going up into it or the person. That's a tractor beam. If you're a Star Wars fan.
Badass.
Oh, actually,
Star Trek.
January 26th, 2023, scientists built a working tractor beam. So bam, there you go. They exist.
As of July, it is now October 3rd.
June 6th, 2023. A real tractor beam and how it works, often used in fiction to grab objects, scientists have now brought it to real life.
How big is it? How big is it? Could it pick up a Douglas C-47?
Well, I don't know. Maybe it can pick up a cow. Okay. It says, the researchers used beams of electrons to create opposite charges and attract objects to the beam for manipulation. The goal was to find a safe and effective way to pare down the ever-growing field of space junk orbiting our planet.
They're going to do
what a lame excuse.
They're going to do the tractor beam in space. That's dope.
But yes, they created, so scientists, totally unrelated to this story.
If this was a viable theory to them in the 70s, yes. No. So is it still the 50s? Are we still in the 50s?
Yes.
Okay.
So a real life tractor beam is either being developed, whatever, to collect space debris. But the whole point of a tractor beam is to bring objects to you. Okay, so again, if you've ever seen any kind of depiction of a UFO, you know what a tractor beam is.
The tractor beam that takes me up to get the experiments done.
Yes, correct. Precisely. So the reason that this theory was not so far-fetched to them is because many legitimate pilots had reported their planes being taken over by UFOs. Now, I don't mean like little aliens. This could be any unidentified flying object. Okay, so
it's called something else now. I forget, but yeah.
Yeah. But in 1948 in Kentucky, in what is known as the Montel incident, a young pilot was killed after losing control of his plane while chasing a UFO. And in 1958 in Snag, the area that was where Douglas was reported missing, 2 men out on a moose hunt reported seeing an oval UFO hovering above the marsh.
That looked like a Tic Tac.
So, of course, there are skeptics. But in the one case that is almost unarguable by anybody, it is one of the most well-known UFO cases per the military. I've never heard of this, but I certainly do now because I went down this long freaking rabbit hole.
Oh my God.
I went down this long freaking rabbit hole. So
what's this incident?
I'm talking about it right now.
Okay.
So the reason that this tractor beam theory could be a genuine possibility is that in October of 1978 in Australia, a man named Frederick Valentich, who was a pilot, he took off at 9:06 a.m. and immediately, all of a sudden, things started going wrong. He described that there's something about 1,000 feet above him and he can't identify it. He said it was moving quickly, had a green light, and was sort of metallic. This goes on for about 6 minutes. He's communicating with the air controllers, but then at 9:11 a.m., his last report comes through, and it says, that strange craft is hovering on top of me again. It's hovering, and it's not an aircraft. In this transmission, the last thing that's heard is the sound of clashing metal. And so the plane was never found, ever. No trace of it. And the air controllers believe that that clashing metal was that hovering, whatever was hovering above his plane, connecting to his plane. Because as soon as they heard that clashing metal, they lost all connection to the plane, and it was never seen from or heard of again, have not found any trace of it. And that happened in Australia. And so many believe that that is a very real thing that could happen here. So, you know, tractor beams are real, cat.
Just not on this earth as of earlier this year, but since the summer. All right.
So just so you know, as far as Frederick goes, you know, again, Department of Transportation, they were a little skeptical about the UFO disappearance until they heard the sound. They originally said that he may have been disoriented and just saw his own lights reflecting on water, or he was flying upside down. But the air controllers said that there's no way. If you're listening to the transmission, he very clearly says something is orbiting above him and that it has a shiny metal surface and a green light. And then he started reporting engine failures. And when he asked to identify the aircraft, he said it's not an aircraft. And then his transmission was immediately interrupted by unidentified noise that the air controllers later described as that metallic kind of clashing sound. So there was searches for him in the air. They searched on the ground. They had boats in the water looking for him. I believe there was 7 or 8 airplanes looking for him. They looked over 1,000 different square miles. And to this day, they have never found him. So, anywho.
That's a very interesting story. That could be a whole episode.
Yeah. And so
I want to hear that. I want to hear that audio.
Well, so because of that story, though, they say that could very well explain how it is possible that the Douglas was taken by a UFO. Like, basically, the UFO hovered over the Douglas, used the tractor beam, and took him. But most people believe that the Douglas flew into a portal. Like that is a very strong theory, and they pretty much believe that it is another, like that the triangle opened a vortex, like based on where the vortex is where the triangle is, that it opened a vortex, and maybe the strong, unusual electromagnetic field that is surrounding Alaska pulled them into that vortex. So, because again,
I have a really not sober person question to ask you.
Yeah.
Because I just not sober right now. What year was this again?
The plane went missing in 1950. Like the Douglas?
No, not the Douglas. Was that 48?
You're talking about the Australia?
The Australian.
1978.
Oh, 78.
So it happened after the Douglas.
Why did I hear 48? Because that was going to blow my mind. Okay.
Well, in 47 was when the 3 women originally reported.
That's what I was thinking then. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So yes.
There's a lot of dates.
Yeah, there are a lot of dates. Most of it's in 1948 and 1950. Like when all the planes went missing, like the military search and rescue, that was all 1950.
But then in the 70s.
Yeah, and then the other plane, and then the 78 was the Australia incident.
That's it.
Where they said that it is very possible. And another reason they also, I skipped over that, was that the Douglas did, so it was all along its 8-hour journey, it was supposed to have several check-ins.
Yeah, sure.
And so the first check-in is the one where they made it, and they said, we're perfectly fine, everything's going great, everything's working. They missed their second check-in, but the air control didn't think anything about it because he said everything was going great, and he was supposed to be in Montana. He was pretty close to, like, they were supposed to be. So they were just going to wait and hear from Montana, which is where they were headed. But Montana said they haven't shown up. And so they waited, and they were trying to, maybe they got off path. Maybe there was some weather. So they, tried to reach. And then it was only an hour later that they started all of the search efforts because they could not find them, had no connection with them. And so
it had been a total of 6 hours since when they sent out search and rescue?
Yeah, about 5 or 6 hours because they had heard from them 2 hours in.
Well, 6 hours.
But again, they've searched that entire path route. Again, they had planes, people on the ground, all kinds of stuff.
So do cars go missing? People walking on the road?
People go missing quite a bit. Obviously, hikers go missing.
Serial killers,
weather, animals. But there's a lot that are unexplained. There's a whole list of people who literally pretty much vanished.
Like
there was
the rapture, just they're gone.
There was there was one, and oh gosh, I can't remember his name, but he was like a war veteran,
has tractor beams.
And he was
you just see a bunch of people going up. Okay.
Yeah, but there was a man, and I want to say he was in his 80s or his 90s, and he had trouble walking because he had injuries from war, and he was at a freaking baseball game or something. Literally, just a normal public event. Oh no, it was a 4th of July parade. Oh my God. July 4th parade. And he was seen kind of walking off, and then he was never seen from again. He wasn't in the woods. He wasn't in the snow. He never returned home.
He booked it. Haha, I've been lying all this time.
And he had a hard time walking. And they're like, why would there's no motive for someone to attack him. It's not like he had money. Everyone knew him in the town. Never seen from again. Never heard from again. His stuff never went missing. Never found his cane. Never found any trace of him. But that's normal there in Alaska. People.
Yeah, he just disappeared. It's just weird.
So 10 I'll just read this real quick.
Okay.
So these are 10 of strange disappearances in the Alaska Triangle. And they say right now there's 16,000 people missing with no explanation in the Alaska Triangle. Just the Triangle, not even all of Alaska. We're just talking about the Triangle area. So these are all very, very short. So this one was Richard Griffiths, and he was famous for inventing a wilderness survival cocoon that he desperately wanted to test out. So in the summer of 2006, this seemed to be the perfect time for him to do so. Nobody questioned his motives when he left for the wilderness of Alaska. It took over a year for anyone to even report him missing. But upon investigation, the authorities figured that a bus had dropped him along the Alaskan highway. He checked into a lodge near the White River. Here he left some of his gear and informed some of the people that he was planning to go camping in a small town at the national park. However, when Richard took to the hills, he never returned. They believed he was testing his wilderness cocoon, and no one bothered to check because they thought the people in the town thought he was going out into the wilderness to test this. But to this date, his body has never been found. His cocoon was never found. He had left a lot of his equipment at the place near the national park. And he was just never came back. This one was Alan Foster, and he makes the list of people who disappeared in the triangle. On September 9th, 2013, he was flying a plane, a Piper PA-32-260, and
not military.
Right. And it was later reported missing while traveling over the Alaska Triangle region. The National Transport Safety Board reports that Allen had been flying under a visual flight rules flight plan and continued flying around 3:30 p.m. He contacted Juneau Flight Service indicating that he would stop at Cordova if the conditions dictated. However, 18 minutes after takeoff, somewhere between the Malaspina Glacier and the Gulf of Alaska, the radar showed Allen's aircraft descending rapidly to 1,100 feet before completely disappearing off the radar.
Whoa.
No one has ever heard from Allen again. No remains of his body nor the aircraft have ever been found.
They would have found something. They would have found an impact site.
It says Allen's disappearance is bizarre because he was an experienced flyer. He had over 9,700 flight hours in various aircrafts. He kept asking for key details before, during, and during his flight, and he never reported any problems before disappearing. And the reason it was so suspicious is because, again, it was in the Alaska Triangle. Fred Minano was an educator and mentor, and he mentored on surviving, living, hunting, and living like in the Alaskan wildlife. Okay, so he was prepared.
And this area wasn't like, just forest. There's like frozen tundra and mountains.
He was a traditional educator and mentor on subsistence, living, hunting, and culture. And he was reported missing on August 17th, 2020.
Oh, wow.
There is little information about his disappearance. The police only know that he took shelter in a nearby cabin on the first day that he went missing. Several years later, there is no trace of his remains. And sadly, the disappearance is typical for most victims of the triangle. Little information, no body, no trace.
What was he doing out there? Like he was just camping. He was testing out his skill.
This guy was he had, I guess, gone out into the woods, and someone reported him missing, and they found evidence that he had been at a shelter, like at a cabin, but then no trace after that. So here's the veteran. Leonard Lane was 73-year-old World War II veteran at the time, and on the evening of July 4th, 1995, he was reported missing after a parade in Fairbanks. He vanished in the Triangle where he had taken a walk. Those who had seen him moments before he went missing say that he was limping because of his injuries sustained during the war. Typical to the other cases, there are no leads, no body. 2 years after he went missing, he was declared legally dead, but the case remains unsolved.
Wow.
Yeah. This one was a Thomas Nissy, and he was a well-known nurse who traveled through Alaska, picking up different shifts in various locations. He had a well-paying job and a perfect mode of transportation. So, he was reported missing by the employer. And so he was staying at a Super 8 motel in Anchorage at the time that he was reported missing. He hadn't shown up for work. It was a short flight from Bethel, Alaska. to Anchorage. So he was staying in Anchorage, going to Bethel. So anyways, investigators report that he had been spotted buying a pack of cigarettes and a lighter and chips and soda at a gas station the night before he was reported missing. Upon questioning the staff, they said they had saw a different man in his room on that same night he went missing, but they never found that man. They never found him. His bike was found later and his Jeep was found later, but nobody knows. Like, his Jeep and bike were found, but his body was never found.
Wow. Or his Jeep and bike together?
No, they were a couple miles apart.
Weird.
But yeah, this one is another. Shanna Ullman was on June 3rd, 2019. She was leaving a friend's house in Fairbanks, Alaska around noon. She had dropped a friend off at her close to where she lived. And when Shanna was entirely out of sight, her friend concluded she was okay, that she had made it home. But several hours later, Shanna's roommate called to say that Shanna wasn't home. And after filing a missing persons case, the authorities combed the entire area. Shanna was never seen again. And to this date, no one knows what happened to her, because literally her friend had been visiting or whatever and dropped her off and watched her walk towards her house, and her roommate called her friend and said, "Hey, where is she?" And she's like, "I dropped her off." Never seen again. I mean,
isn't that just terrifying? Because even if it, if it's not aliens, you kind of hope that it's something wicked cool like that, and not like, oh, there was someone lying in wait.
Yeah.
And took her before she could even get to her front door.
Yeah.
Like the more.
I mean, and there's no
scary,
videos of people taking anyone. There's no serial killer report.
There's probably people have Ring doorbells now. There's probably lots of.
And there have been serial killers that they've arrested in Alaska, and they've found those bodies. These people, literally no trace of them have ever been found again. Like this guy, Paul, was a 65-year-old marathoner runner. He was competing for the first time in the Mount Marathon race, where he suddenly disappeared. So participants have to run up a forest mountain and navigate through creeks about 3.5 miles. And like any other competition, the race has its fair share of trouble, but none of them involved disappearances, which was the case for this man. The last person to see him was a race steward. He remembered seeing him ascend to the turnaround point about 200 feet from the finish line. 200 feet from the finish line. And even though the weather conditions were a little foggy, the steward says he saw no problem for the runner. If anything, when asked his bib number, the guy replied 548, indicating that he was still conscious and perfectly fine. However, that was the last time he was ever seen of or heard of again. Mountain rescue experts, state troopers, search dogs, all looked for the mountain, which was in the triangle. Never found his body, never saw him again. And he was literally seen 200 feet from the finish line. The steward saw him. He talked to him. He asked him. He made sure he was doing okay. And then he just vanished from the race. Never finished the race. Never seen from again.
Wow. That one trips me out, because 200 feet, that's not very far. And even if it was foggy, you'd practically see them those whole 200 feet. So he just looked away, and then the next second the guy's not there. Damn.
So I mean, this is the last one I'll read, because this is kind of tied
to really
to
fast serial killer. That's the other option.
I'll just read this one really quick, because this kind of has to do with the flights and the military.
Okay.
And this was another big one that was mentioned in the show. So again, a lot of these people are people you probably hadn't heard of, but these ones are, they were powerful men at the time. It was Hale Boggs, the House Majority Leader from Louisiana, and Nick, I have no idea, I'm going to butcher the name, so I'm just going to spell it, Begich. He was a congressman from Alaska.
Like Begich?
Sure. So together with their aides, the two had embarked on a journey that involved passing over Anchorage and Juneau in Alaska. However, their plane vanished mid-air, prompting the government to call all hands on deck in a bid to locate the aircraft. Several months later, No bodies or plane wreckage were ever recovered, ending the mission. Nobody knows what happened to them. The plane literally vanished off the radar, mid-air.
Just bloop.
Just gone. So
that's so scary.
They talk about that one a lot in a lot of the documentaries about the triangle.
I'm gonna have to watch this before next week.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll watch this one.
This is the first episode.
Okay, I'll just watch the first episode. Oh, I can't wait.
But yeah, it's been 50 years since they disappeared, and still to this day, no evidence, no trace. It was a massive search and rescue. Just like it actually had more people searching than it did for the Douglas. So this had 140 military and civilian aircrafts.
Oh my gosh. What is the cost of that?
They searched over 325,000 square miles, and the wreckage.
How many?
325,000 square miles were searched for the plane,
which is so much bigger than the actual triangle.
And then they searched for 39 days. And then they canceled because there was no sign of the wreckage or the people.
32,000 square miles. And so that's 32. The triangle is 32,000 square miles. And how many square miles? 300?
325,000 square miles were searched.
That's like the whole state.
Yeah. So it was on October 16th, 1972. They were flying to a fundraiser. And it was a twin engine plane. It was being piloted by a very expert pilot. His name was Don. And it was the two congressmen and then their aides, like their aides. So they also disappeared in the triangle, mid-air, off the radar. It was a private flight. They were the only ones on board. No trouble had been reported. Everything they were on the flight plan. Everything was fine.
You kind of hope that they were taken to someplace really cool and not like they didn't suffer.
Right.
That they're alive somewhere,
Yeah. And so, again, there are just so many unexplained experiences in this triangle on its own. And just... I know some of you are going to go watch this damn show, even though I just said don't do it. I should have even told you.
You can watch the first episode.
Watch the first episode.
And then that's it.
Yeah.
Try really hard to say, I'm going to wait for Ashley.
Yeah.
I'm going to wait. It's only a week.
There's UFOs. There's paranormal cases. There's...
Pretend like you're watching Only Murders in the Building and just wait a week.
So I'm going to play this one last clip and then I'll shut up so you guys can all go about your lives again. But this just kind of explains, again, this goes back to talking about the Douglas.
This is what's called an action copy. It's just the standard conclusion to any investigation that occurred in 1950. This is the summation of the search and rescue effort for the C-54. And you can see that on the 23rd of February, 1950, the search for the missing C-54 aircraft is discontinued. To this day, the original C-54 has never been found. 85 aircraft, tens of thousands of military personnel searching 400,000 square miles. Not a trace. It's as if it vanished into thin air.
So, I'll leave you with that. And that's just one thing about the Alaska Triangle, man. I'm never going to Alaska.
My father-in-law flies to Alaska all of the time.
Well, you better hug him real tight every time because...
Oh my gosh. I know. I want to send him a picture. Do you fly through here? He probably does. Okay, so guys, promise us you're only going to watch the first episode. You're going to wait until next week.
I promise that it will be good if you wait. I'm actually so into the stories that I do my research and I've watched so many. I'm so excited.
This one you're...
Yes, because it's not like...
Not the other one.
I can play it in my office, right? Like it's hard to play like serial killer documentaries because my walls are very thin at my office and I can just imagine the neighbors are like, what the fuck is going on in that office right now? Like reporting me to people.
I have to wait till everyone's asleep. I can't do. Yeah, I gotta
right?
wait.
And so I play this while I'm at work, just researching, because I go down these huge rabbit holes when they start talking about stuff, and I start looking up because they show.
Like I have to work, but what the fuck?
They show the videos and they show the proof. They talk about the proof they have. So then I go down these rabbit holes, like trying to find them and stuff. So yeah. Anyways, I'll post the some of the other articles about the Douglas and some of the other documentaries and stuff like that.
Yeah, so go to the show notes, please, please, please.
Yeah.
While you're there, make sure to like us and review us if you haven't already.
Yes.
And share us with your friends, because you know, just love us. Love us because we love you. All right, well, so we'll see you next week for some other crazy Alaskan triangle tales.
Yes.
But until then, see you later, and don't disappear. Or go find more tractor beam information while you're at it. Okay, we'll see you next week.
Bye.